Mr. Mr. Smith, never heard that before. So, Mr. Smith, do I understand that you will be managing this portion?
So actually, I've spoken to our meeting managers from prior, and they are going to manage this portion of the
Okay,
meeting.
all right then.
And with that, we hand it off to Mr. Smith.
They're very good meeting managers. So I am excited to bring you our strategic plan. I do want to say that I called the members of the leadership team to the table because it is a group effort, and it's our group working with the school board tonight to get some information and guidance about the strategic plan as we move forward. And so you'll have an opportunity to weigh in on a lot of the hard work that we've been engaging in leadership team meetings. We've had a retreat around the strategic plan where we've spent a number of hours looking at the language, ensuring that we have the right language, looking at the desired outcomes and ensuring that they do align with the work. And so what you're going to see tonight is actually a culmination of a lot of time and effort. And we listened to you in November. We went back. Ms. McLaughlin, we actually reached out to Arlington Public Schools and had a conversation with their director who is running their strategic plan. They actually looked to us to see what we're doing with our plan. They're starting to do their plan this year, the renewal of their plan. So as we talk about strategic plans, the slide behind me should say, what is a strategic plan? And adapted from the Balanced Scorecard Institute, you can see that a strategic plan is a document used to communicate the organization's goals. And for us, while we have goals, it's really looking at our desired outcomes and then those actions needed to achieve the goals. Effective strategic planning articulates not only where an organization is going and the actions needed to make progress, but also how it will know if it is successful. And so what we've built into our strategic plan so that we'll know how we're successful are the metrics. And the thing that we'll also see is that we have new performance targets. You'll note that on this slide, there's a discussion around actions, and we're going to have an opportunity to talk about the actions in the plan at a subsequent work session. Today, we really want that input on the desired outcomes, the prioritization, and the metrics. So the next slide gives you a bit of a graphic on what a strategic plan is and really the difference between strategic planning and strategic management. And I go back to Ms. Corbett-Sanders at our last meeting in November. We had a bit of a discussion around the table about strategic planning versus strategic management. And you can see as we have the plane that's flying overhead there at that 30,000-foot level, that's where we talk about the mission, the vision, the beliefs. And as you go down, as you get closer to the ground, you actually start to see the work that's happening within our departments and within our schools. And so as you go down to about that 18,000 to 20-foot level, it's the goals and overarching strategies, the desired outcomes, where we're going to spend a lot of our time today. And then we're even going to get into those metrics and performance targets. As I said, at a later work session, we'll have an opportunity to bring you some amended and refined language on some of the actions that we have in the plan. And then really as staff, we'll take a closer dive into those action plans that we'll be doing within our departments to ensure that we're going to actually get the work done regarding the actions, and then looking at those programs, services, projects, and initiatives that support those actions. So this is just a nice graphic to have to sort of see where we are in the process. We use this in our leadership team meetings to sort of talk about where we are in the process. And so we felt that it was good to share this graphic with you. So the outline of today's presentation, we're going to provide you an update of what we've done since the November work session. And again, we've done quite a bit. We're going to describe those proposed refinements to the strategic plan, specifically around the desired outcomes. We're going to introduce to you the refined metrics and those performance targets. And we're also going to show you some of the work that we've done around the metrics. And then we're going to request your acceptance of the work that we've done to this point so that we can bring even more work back to you in the future. And to just be very blunt and clear, oftentimes we sit at this table and Mr. Moon is very good about asking, well, what do you want from the board? What are we to do? And Mr. Moon has just nodded. So to be very clear, this is what we need from you this evening. We would like feedback on different elements of our strategic plan, that refined language of the desired outcomes. We'd like to get information on the prioritization of the plan, and we'd like to get some information on the refined metrics. And got very good feedback from our meeting managers on being very clear that the actions will be discussed at a future section or future work session. So I know that you may want to start talking about actions tonight, but again, you'll have an opportunity to do that in the future. And I know that we've gotten some good feedback from board members around some actions. If you don't see your feedback here this evening, it's because we're going to incorporate that into a future work session. So this is what we've done since November. We've prioritized our desired outcomes based on the school board input. We've created those proposed refinements to the metrics that we'll use in our annual planning to the board with our annual goal reports that the individuals around the table here provide you. You'll note that any changes that we've made to our plan, any refinements that we're suggesting are in red. This is that crosswalk that you asked for. You asked for a crosswalk of what do we currently have in the plan, and then what are you suggesting for the plan. And you'll see that with our desired outcomes, and you'll see that within our language around our metrics. So again, these are the elements of our plan. We know that in our last meeting in November, there was some question about the language of the plan. In Arlington, they use goals, they have desired outcomes, they have performance targets. And so we wanted to show the board and be very clear about the language that we're using within our plan. So the elements of our plan, we have goals that identify our 4 main goal areas. We have those overarching strategies. As you can see, that they articulate the varied aspects of the goals, and these strategies are the drivers that will guide the work of FCPS staff. Our work today is around those desired outcomes, and those are the tangible end products that we will deliver when the overarching strategy is realized, and they will highlight the work of staff. And then you've got some subsections down below where we talk about the monitoring and implementation of the plan. And to monitor the plan, you need to have strong metrics. And we'll have that discussion today. And then you need to have performance targets to know that you're actually meeting your metrics. Within the implementation portion of the plan, you have the actions, and that's the work that staff members will do to reach our outcomes. And these are the building blocks that underpin the outcomes. And then, of course, we've added some information about funding. And funding for this plan, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it is intended to indicate the level of current funding. So what we have built in to the FY18 budget, and then we'll focus on the additional funding needed. And it's important to note, and you'll see later on, that these are initial estimates. We are still in the process of verifying our numbers for the plan, so the numbers that you see here aren't necessarily those final numbers. On slide 8, you'll see that we've updated the implementation status within the plan. We actually, again, used feedback from the board at our last meeting to show that the red circle shows that the action is actually at the beginning stages. The yellow circle identifies that or highlights that the plan is in the developing, which is really the designing and piloting phase, and we have several pilots going on in the system at any one time. And when those pilots end, we may extend those pilots, we may refine, and so that's what's happening. Well, that's happening in the developing stage. In the implementation stage is when we will execute and then refine, and that doesn't always happen in a linear fashion. Sometimes we'll execute, we'll refine, we'll start something in another school or another area, another region, and continue to refine. And then lastly, the implementation status of embedded shows that there is division-wide implementation of a particular action. I talked about the funding earlier, that the funding here is intended to indicate that level of current funding in the FY18 budget, and then future funding is the additional funding that we would need to complete the action. So it's not necessarily time-bound as much as it is what we would need to complete that particular action. And these costs are, again, our initial estimates, and these costs do not include school board requests that we've had around the budget and or any feedback that we'll get from the board this evening around those items that we may reprioritize in the process. So as we talk about priorities, I had an opportunity to share a lot of this with you earlier, but I just do want to make this clear for the public who's watching. As we think about priorities, we've divided the plan up into 4 distinct areas with regard to desired outcomes. We have our short-term priorities, which we feel that we will be able to address within the next few years. You can see that the time frame for that is the 18 to 2020 school year. And those are the desired outcomes that were designated as most critical by the school board and by the leadership team. Our midterm desired outcomes are those priorities that we feel we would be able to, again, complete within the 2020 to 2022 school year. And then those long-term outcomes are still priority. They're still important, but we feel that they wouldn't serve as the primary focus of this particular plan. And you'll have an opportunity to weigh in on where we've placed these desired outcomes in priority. Those sustaining desired outcomes are those outcomes that are already fully implemented by 2018 and are ongoing. And the big question is why. We know that we created that this board, not every member of this board had an input to the previous plan. So we've had the question, well, why are we even doing this? Why are we refining the language? This is a plan that we've had in place. Why are we doing this work? Really, one of the reasons why we're doing it is to increase accountability, to ensure that the work that we're actually doing is aligned with our plan. We've always said that the plan is ever evolving, and so as our work evolves, the actions have evolved, and we feel like we want to be more clear about those desired outcomes within the plan. The changes that we've done with the desired outcomes, we feel make the outcomes much more measurable and provide greater alignment with our metrics. It helps us to facilitate a common understanding with the language within our community with our stakeholders. We know that we sometimes have a knack to speak in educationalese within the community, so we feel that this new language will help with our stakeholders. And lastly, while it's not up here on the slide, it will give all of you an opportunity to weigh in on the plan with regard to the language. And again, we know that we've had some board members who are new to the board who didn't have that opportunity. So this next part of the presentation will go rather quickly because we want to spend most of our time actually looking at the language. But I did want to walk through, I'll ask you this because as we think about the time, would you like me to walk through the desired outcomes? We have 8 desired outcomes here with the current language and then the new language. I know that we gave you some homework, and I know that we all do our homework, and I'm hopeful that we did our homework. So I could read these desired outcomes to you as we go through and then come back, that was our original plan. or we could go through one at a time. I think without any guidance, I'm going to just read through and we'll come back one at a time. So let's just read through quickly. So on slide 12, you'll see that the original desired outcome was that the curriculum will reflect portrait of graduate outcomes in all content areas where students are appropriately challenged. The refined desired outcome, we've still kept the same flavor and spirit of the outcome, but that all pre-K-12 students will continuously progress in their development of portrait of a graduate attributes. Slide 13, the original language is the current desired outcome is that achievement gaps will be eliminated. That refined desired outcome language is that FCPS will eliminate student opportunity, access, and achievement gaps. Slide 14, the current desired outcome is that all qualifying publicly funded future FCPS students will have access to high-quality early education programs, with the refined language as all future FCPS students will have access to high-quality early education programs. As you can see, there's not much change with the original language and the new language. For caring culture, the original language for this desired outcome is that FCPS will demonstrate cultural competency and sensitivity when supporting families, students, and employees. The refined language is that FCPS employees will demonstrate cultural responsiveness when supporting families, students, and other staff. Slide 16, current desired outcome is that FCPS students will be encouraged and supported in making healthy life choices. The refined language is that FCPS students will make healthy life choices. For Premier Workforce, the current language states that employees will benefit from competitive compensation packages. The refined language is that FCPS will offer market competitive compensation packages. Slide 18, the current language is that to recruit, hire, and retain employees to maintain a premier workforce, and we've clearly just refined that to say that FCPS will recruit, hire, and retain a premier workforce.
I'm sorry. Going back to your make healthy life choices, I know that Ms. Evans made a proposal on that. Have you incorporated that language?
So Ms. Evans has made a proposal on that. We did actually we've answered Ms. Evans' questions, and she is, we've had some conversations with her about that, and she's happy to hear how the discussion goes this evening on that. But we did speak with her and have been able to explain why we have this language in the plan. But we did speak with her.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted
Yes.
to make sure, even though she's not here, I wanted to make sure she was represented.
Yes,
Just not sure what the protocol. Do you want to wait till the end before we comment?
yeah.
We are gonna. I just wanted to let him. We just wanted to let him finish, and we'll come back.
Yes, we'll go right back to the beginning.
Elizabeth will add you. Do you want to be added as well? Okay.
And slide 19, the original language is that FCPS will regularly and systematically advocate for fiscal resources at the county, state, and federal levels. The refined language is that the school board and division superintendent will systematically advocate for fiscal resources at the county, state, and federal levels. So if we go back to slide 12, this is now where we'll have an opportunity to engage the board in the language that we've provided as refined language. We have our, we'll have an opportunity to engage the board. We have our goal champions here who have been instrumental in developing the language, as well as the rest of our leadership team members who are here who've weighed in on the language as well. And so with that, we ask that you look at the refined language, and we'll have a bit of a discussion about that refined language.
We're going to start with Elizabeth and Megan.
So if we could go back to the, just go back like 2 slides, I think, a couple slides to the employees.
Premier workforce.
No, forward. Yeah, no, this is it. So I know that we're in control of who we recruit and we're in control of who we hire. We're not in control of who we retain. So I appreciate, and maybe this is all just aspirational language or goal language, but we will recruit. It's although it's not a premier. I'm worried about my modifiers here, because it only counts if you add it all together. So we're going to recruit, people who will be a part of or something of a premier workforce. Certainly hire, people who emulate the qualities of premier. But the part I have is the real struggle I have is on the retain. Is it not appropriate to say that we will strive to retain or we will work to retain? Because we're not going to retain them. People leave. This is like, we're setting ourselves up for failure a little bit on this one.
I think we've struggled with that a little bit. Well, sorry, let me rephrase that.
I hate to name reality, but
in the terminology, and I see the perspective you're looking at, but I think that also talks to one of Dr. Brabrand's ease in terms of effectiveness, and us looking at not only individuals choosing to leave the division, but making sure that we have a robust and effective evaluation system. And so the retention goes to not only just making sure people don't want to leave, but that we are retaining a premier workforce, that we are keeping our individuals to a certain threshold that we expect them to be in FCPS. And I get what you're saying about that, but I think there's still goals that we want to meet, and that's where the metrics come in. We look at what our retention rate is, what our evaluation strategies are, and so that's where we get to that retention piece as part of that. Elizabeth or Ms. Schultz.
No, just Elizabeth, please. And I don't want to. I have no intention of wordsmithing. I just feel like will work too. I still think we will is ascribing something that we can't do for all 3 of those parts, and I think we will work to recruit, hire, and retain a premier workforce, and then we can hold ourselves accountable to the work too. That's just. Anybody can discuss what they want. Can you advance one or two, a couple?
Can I just say one thing? This is good for us because we've had this. We spent 4 or 5 months doing all the stuff that you're going to do now to check us. We wanted to keep the retain in because we think that's a powerful metric. We want to benchmark ourselves against national standards, other school systems. But we also debated, can we control it, Elizabeth? And that's part of your point, is that one we can definitely hire, right? We can definitely go out and recruit. We can definitely hire. The retain, is it our choice? But we feel like that one maybe indirectly we can create conditions, the evaluation process, school climate, engagement, to keep people, compensation.
That's the working part. Like, we have to work to do it. We have to. It's not that we will do it. Right. We will work to it, and we may have to. That's a continuous work, a continuous improvement process mindset.
And this is why we're here, because we want to hear the board, and the board wants to tweak. I'm going to be held accountable for this, so I want you all thinking through. Well, okay, it's easy to say you can hold accountable for the recruiting, we can prove that. The hiring, the retaining, it's not as direct, but you could argue there's indirect things we can do. So we want to hear this discussion and then see where the will of the board is on these desired outcomes, because these are going to be the drivers for what we're going to do over the next several years.
Okay. I'm trying to get to the other slide because we're not advancing in the direction that I'm looking. I'm sorry. So the resource stewardship. I guess I didn't maybe think that this was our original language, and I I don't love it because I don't know that this necessarily says, because this talks about what everybody else is going to do. It doesn't talk about our responsibility. Like, where's the component of the responsibility for the resources we have? And maybe I never noticed it before that it's said it that way, but I feel like this says we're going to make sure that everybody else is good stewards of their resources that they are supposed to give us. And it doesn't have a, our responsibility quotient is missing.
But maybe that's the design.
Well, it was in our original discussions. And our when we originally came up with all of this, this notion was that we would be good stewards of our resources. And I don't have any problem with this. I mean, I actually think that's good, but we're in control of the advocating part, but we're not in control of them following through with their resources. And it isn't just fiscal resources. There's human capital as one of our resources, and money and buildings and vehicles. And I mean, there's a lot to resources that goes beyond money.
And so we'll note that these are the desired outcomes that were prioritized by the board and by leadership team. There are other desired outcomes that we have at different priority levels. And so if you feel that there are other desired outcomes listed that you would like to move up, we could certainly have that discussion. There are desired outcomes where we talk about budget decision-making frameworks that we would have in place here in Fairfax. Benchmarking processes will weigh major organizational operations against comparable school systems for effectiveness, efficiency, return on investment. Those are all things that we had in the plan. They just didn't rise to the short-term priority.
I still don't see where in there it is that we're going to hold ourselves responsible for our own resource stewardship.
I just wanted, because Ryan just clarified something for me. Marty, what I was confused about was, see, these are just short-term priority outcomes, Elizabeth. So when you go to the actual plan, the ones you're talking about are under midterm or long-term. And so there was a prioritization session that Ryan's helping, of that, and that's when we got to these short terms. So those are in there. They're in the different document.
And if you feel that you'd like to have those moved up to a more short-term look, we'll have that opportunity to do that this evening.
Or vice versa, if there's something short-term that you don't see as more of immediate priority, it can be moved to middle or longer term. Part of the whole goal here is trying to get down to a shorter number of priorities that we're going to be held accountable to do over,
a 2-year period.
Over 2-year periods.
Okay, I'm digging through. I'm sure I will eventually find where it's buried in the 54 pages. I'm just going to say, if we're not good stewards of our resources in the short term, it's just going to get to be a bigger problem in the mid and the long term. So I think that being a good steward of our resources now will help us later.
44.
And in the words of Mr. Brian Hill, hold on, because we're not sustainable. So strap in. So
Elizabeth, if you want to look at some of that, it's on page 44. Yes.
The first one on page 44. Right. Next we have Megan, followed by Niharika.
So I do want to say, first of all, to my colleagues, that when Sandy wrote her input to all of us, and in particular, her first point of advocacy was under the caring culture section, that she wanted to have the language restored, and I'll find I think it's on page 31, where the desired outcome, the original language is FCPS students will be encouraged and supported in making healthy life choices. And the red line recommendation was just FCPS students will make healthy life choices. There is an important distinction. This isn't about just streamlining the language. It's where's the onus. And as Sandy noted, this board has worked extremely hard in talking about, as an educational system, what is our role to help shape and guide students in this very important value. And so it would be my advocacy that we maintain the original language. I think a lot gets lost with the suggested red language. The other thing in relation to this is, honestly, Dr. Brabrand, the actions, some of them are good, but something that is extremely missing here, and I'm going to be really pushing for this with our state legislators and with Michael Malloy. This school system has got to stop pushing a boulder in front of the issue on school nurses. The number of our students in this school system that have autoimmune disorders and other health issues, and we've got 1 per 3,000. A school nurse for every 3,000 students. You can go over to Scottsdale Unified in Arizona, and Arizona is not known for funding public schools, and they have the recommended ratios that the ANA, the American Nursing Associations, recommended, that it should be closer to the 1 in 750. That's actually the General Assembly guidelines as well. And I know we all dislike when the General Assembly has all these unfunded mandates, but I would like to see FCPS start being part of the solution instead of contributing to the problem. And so I think this is a really important area. I don't see anything here about also, looking at strengthening and bolstering our school psychologists and social workers. We know that we have a growing population with need. And if we're trying to look at ways to help get to students early in prevention efforts, this needs to be on here. Summits are nice. Summits aren't going to help our kids with opportunity gaps.
If I could, and then I'll let Teresa just respond. 2 things. One, this is exactly the conversation we want. We had a big debate at LT whether we should own the healthy life or be the support. So we had this conversation. And frankly, we went ahead and said, let's put this on here and see where the board wants to go to help shape that. So believe me, we had the exact same discussion. Actions, I just want to repeat for the board something Marty shared. We're in the middle of reviewing the actions. Now, we changed some of the wording of actions that were in here, but we're going back as a leadership team now to say, are these the actions giving the performance metrics that we've developed and set that are going to get us from point A to point B? I don't have all that today. We're in the middle of going through really action by action to see. So Megan or Ms. McLaughlin, there may be a few more things that we would propose taking off or adding under actions that are not here yet. But I hadn't had a chance to do this with leadership team, and now we're really, the exciting thing is our leadership team's digging in and having these robust conversations now. Is this what's going to get us from point A to point B? So thank you for that feedback.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understood something he said. I didn't mean to interrupt. So what you were saying is, for our feedback now, since I was going to be offering feedback, you would like me to keep my focus on the desired outcomes and not worry about the column on actions yet, because we will be able to engage with you all on that later?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
If I could just respond about the language, as Dr. Brabrand said, we went back and forth, and actually Dr. Ramey and I went back and forth quite a bit with this language. And just to share a little bit why we recommended the change, we felt that a language change really, we were looking for a more measurable outcome. And we really wanted the outcome to reflect the impact of our work on students or with students. Not specifically, we thought we could address your other question, in our actions that we develop. So we did feel that we have data points where we can demonstrate progress for students making healthy life choices, such as discipline, attendance, use survey data, such as that.
And I appreciate that. I guess I would still say, I think we can, when you look at what we would measure and you even look at the actions you all have laid out so far, I mean, part of how you measure whether FCPS is encouraging and supporting students to make healthy life choices, how do you measure that? You look at what programs are we offering? What actions are we taking? And so I will still say that I appreciate how you and Dr. Remy want to make sure it looks like it measured. I still think we can measure it based on what actions is this division taking to support and encourage these healthy lifestyles, and I think it is through the programs. So,
And I think we took a little bit of a different interpretation, that those actions are really processes for us instead of actions and measurable outcome that we could demonstrate.
yeah, I still worry that it will have that sense of putting the responsibility on the students, and so I'll look forward to hearing what other people think about that. In terms of then focusing on just desired outcomes, on page 16, desired outcome at the top, achievement gaps will be eliminated. I like the new language. I would humbly suggest, in order to prevent misunderstanding, where it says FCPS will eliminate student opportunity, access, and achievement, I would say FCPS will eliminate gaps in the following 3 areas. Because, not that you would add the 3 areas, but so it would say FCPS will eliminate gaps in, and then you start to read the rest of the sentence. Because otherwise, it looks like FCPS will eliminate student opportunity. It's going to eliminate access and achievement gaps. So I think you want to put gaps in, up toward the front. I mean, I know what everybody was saying, but really what we're talking about is we're eliminating gaps in those 3 areas. So I think you want to say eliminate gaps. Gaps in student opportunity, access, and achievement. So that was one of the things that I sort of...
Yeah, okay.
And then in terms of...
We're taking all of the notes, so yes.
Yeah.
And we will provide some updates because we'd like to get closure on the desired outcomes this evening.
And then on page 28, desired outcome, FCPS will utilize a consistent approach to customer service. I would just say that I really like that desired outcome. I do think that for under actions, we'll want to try to be as specific as possible. I sort of jumped ahead and was looking at how we would do that, because I will say, for the years I've been on the board, we have some schools, Dr. Brabrand, that are phenomenal. And the moment you step in the building, the warmth and welcoming you receive. And then we have some that, oh my goodness, it doesn't matter that I'm on the school board and they know exactly who I am. They are not warm and welcoming, and they're not warm and welcoming to parents. And people have called me and said, oh my goodness, why are those people working in a school system? They clearly don't like people. So, Teresa, you kind of chuckled, so I don't know if I hit a nerve or something.
What Teresa...
Chantilly is very warm and welcoming, but we have a welcoming, I can't remember the name of it, Francisco, through the welcoming walkthrough, and it's a fantastic opportunity. So I was just thinking in my head, other schools, we should reach out and offer them the opportunity for that.
The other thing is Kathleen Waltz is not here, so I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I'm recalling our leadership team discussion. We've actually surveyed our employees. Customer service is one of the things they want more training in. They recognize, Megan, that this is an issue. So we're actually sort of excited that this is one of the things that we're going to work and be building in some of our systematic professional development that Francisco and Kathleen are working on, that we're going to roll out next year, not years from now, next year around our folks. So we're excited, and when we're ready and when we have our stuff ready, we'll be glad to share with the board.
Okay. And then and I guess the only other question I have was under desired outcomes. I apologize if I didn't see it under premier workforce or caring culture. I'm not sure where it might be, but it's the thing that we've talked about a lot, which is workload, employee workload. So I don't know if that's a desired outcome somewhere, but when I was looking at things where on page, I think 33, it said FCPS staff will feel welcome and supported at their work location as a desired outcome, but that was going to be just one of those desired outcome areas where I was going to say, if we haven't captured that, that would be a suggested next step, that we need to have a desired outcome, I believe, that talks about, ensuring a healthy workload or something, because I feel like we are hearing it not just from our teachers in the classroom, but I'm very mindful that a lot of our central administration people are working extremely hard, but to the point that we've got to communicate out that matters to us. People aren't getting burnt out.
One of the strongest ways I believe this board will be able to do that is when you finalize this document, and we're going to go put it in the hands of every employee to let them know what they need to be focusing on around those desired outcomes, and what their responsibility is for it, which is one of the things we're doing in leadership team. We're actually going back a little to go, who owns what on these desired outcomes and the strategies to get there, and that maybe we haven't been as clear as we thought as an organization. We said it, but did we really say who or what groups together are going to collaborate to get this there? But I think part of the workload issue, I think, will be resolved or dealt with as part of this plan.
Okay, and then Mr. McElveen, I promise this is my last suggestion.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry.
I think that I would read that into the desired outcome on 33 about staff feeling welcome and supported at their work locations, but you're correct that we don't have an action item that speaks to it. So your initial question of where it might fit in the plan, I would fit it as an action. Now, if you want it to be a standalone desired outcome, which I'm reading the signals that you're giving me, we can definitely look at that. But that's my immediate reaction. But as Dr. Brabrand said, we'll take all this back and look at potentially a different metric on it, or putting it as an action item.
I appreciate that. And I'll give you the context of why I had that look on my face. You can feel welcomed and supported at your workload while we're working you to death. So my point, so, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I so appreciate you. Just keep working now. I need you to do 20 hours. So the only other one that I really wanted to make sure I put in was on page 44. I think it's capturing a little bit of what Ms. Schultz was saying, and I think others on our board have been saying this for a while. If you look at the top of 44, page 44 at the top, where the overarching strategy 10 is to maximize and align our resources to be accountable and transparent regarding the resources entrusted to us, we're saying that for the next foreseeable 3 years, we have no desired outcome. And I would definitely say for these next 3 years, without question, our desired outcome is what Ms. Schultz was talking about. How can we be fiscally responsible and efficient with our resources that we have, however that language is. I mean, I think the bottom line is the economic horizon in Fairfax County is not going to change in the next 3 years. If we don't demonstrate that we are looking how we can be as effective and efficient with our resources, and the board and the division owns that. So that I would like to just really make sure that is a next step. That's got to be in there.
That could
Marty,
be moved.
Sorry. I have a suggestion.
Yes,
Because
thank you.
I know I wanted to speak to that as well. Do you want our feedback right now when somebody brings that up? Should we just go ahead and give you or did you have that built in later?
So that's built in later as we talk about the prioritization. I know that it's important to look at all of our desired outcomes. We want that feedback on the prioritize first, and then we can take and delve into those that are at different levels.
So what I was thinking was, when Ms. Schultz made that statement, I agreed with that. Megan is now saying that she agrees with that. I have a list of people who I'm pretty sure are going to tell me whether they agreed or didn't agree. So I didn't know if you wanted, at the moment, a quick way for us to say yes, yay, or nay. That's up to you, just a suggestion.
That would certainly help us as we think about the prioritization.
Okay, so...
And Ms. Keysmar, I think...
I can be her if you need me.
I think that what you're doing is great, and I think that it actually occurs, Ms. McLaughlin, at the bottom, the table that's at the bottom of page 45, is not only is there not something at the top of 44, but it actually says it, the middle blocks in the bottom of 45, it says target not set. So it says that measure the gap between the operational and the capital needs versus available resources. I think there's a little something missing after that, and then it says target not set.
So we could give you some quick feedback. I know we can reach out and maybe, flush it out more later, but just if we could get a quick meter right now as to whether generally we agree that this should be a part of the short-term priority with respect to our own stewardship over resources. Yes. No, not take away this, but make what Ms. Yes, add this.
Ensuring that we have something under overarching strategy 10, because right now we don't have anything with regard
correct.
to maximize and align those resources as a short term. So ensuring that we have a short term.
So can I
A
just
short-term
see
effective resource
yes,
stewardship.
yes. Who all would agree with that? Okay, just so you have that. All right.
I'm done now, thank you.
Niharika.
Niharika, thank you.
Okay, so this is going to be really quick since I actually have to get home and do some homework.
Me too.
So
We will make students have healthy choices.
Yeah.
So I know you'll be reviewing the actions themselves, but I'm not sure if these are actions or desired outcomes, so I'm just going to go ahead and go with them. But under the desired outcome, that grading will be an accurate reflection of learning. So two things. How can we, I believe it's under it's under the second strategy, I think, on student success. I'm not sure. Let me pull that up.
Page 20.
Page 20.
Okay. So is there a way that we could, either as a separate desired outcome or as an action item, potentially include something where we're benchmarking our grading and how we're determining if it's an accurate reflection of learning based on periodic feedback from students, and just kind of seeing how the grading policies are being implemented so that even though we have division-wide implementation, we can ensure that it's still actually helping our students. And also, if we could, I'm not sure if this would work for all students, but especially at the high school level, including a desired outcome where students are taking more ownership of their learning and learning to self-advocate in the case of high workload so that they are able to kind of understand where their workload is coming from. So they're not just receiving homework and not understanding where it's coming from, they're being active learners in that process. And then on the desired outcome of supporting students in their healthy life choices, I'd like to echo Ms. McLaughlin's point that I think we should retain the original language. And then as part of that, I'd like us to include, in addition to the summits at the division-wide summits, supporting student-led mental health initiatives and student governments in their mental health awareness efforts, because we've seen that more and more student governments and student organizations are doing a great job of having these stress less, laugh more weeks that are actually benefiting their students. And then also including, either as a desired outcome or an action item, having counselors, school psychologists, and social workers have more intentional engagement with our students from an earlier age. I know one of the students in the forum earlier brought up how, especially at the high school level, a lot of students don't really interact with their counselors until they're applying for colleges. So if we can prioritize having them start working with freshmen, start working with younger students, so that students can build a large support network earlier, that would be great.
Thank you.
I'll make it quick. Page 13 of your slides.
Oh, slide 13.
Yeah, I thought we were focusing on these first.
Yes. So slide 13.
Yes. I fully support the recommendations for change that Ms. McLaughlin offered. Of FCPS will eliminate gaps in student opportunity, access, and achievement, or something like that. Page 16. I understand Ms. Johnson, where you're coming from on the outcome being students will make healthy life choices, but kind of following up on some of the conversation earlier about what do we have control over, it will be that students will be taught or will be encouraged, but we can't. Yeah, but the outcome, I think we have to tighten the two, because you have a certain amount with making healthy choices. We're going to take responsibility for it, but some of those responsibilities are also parents and other people. And so I would just encourage that we look at that. And then on page 18, I actually think we have to include the retention of as part of our metric or our outcome, because when we look at retention, we're actually, if we create the positive climate, we will retain a workforce. And if we don't create a positive work environment, we won't retain them. So I would encourage leaving the language retained, because the cost of replacing is a lot higher than retaining. Page 19, I would encourage that when we look at this, we take an active responsibility for the management of our fiscal resources. And I notice where we say we need additional funding to do things in the future, part of that conversation should be additional funding. Well, what are we going to take away from? What are we doing now that we can actually delay doing until we actually get those the funds? Because it is very clear that this year we are likely to achieve our budgetary ask.
Not in the future.
But in the future, we need to, as part of One Fairfax, recognize that we have to be responsible stewards of our resources. And that's the end of my comments on this portion.
Thank you. I agree. Under the student success, and I'm going off of these, on slide 12, where we're talking about opportunity, access, and achievement gaps. So however grammatically you want to arrange the words, dealing with opportunity, access, in addition to achievement gaps is excellent. When we talk about, students making healthy life choices. I am listening to what my colleagues say about wanting the original language. However, I like the accountability of going with the students who make healthy life choices. However we come down, the data points that Teresa is suggesting are the important data points. So it's not just what programs we offer, but what are the results. So I can see why you would come to that, and I like that shorter, stronger language. But if my colleagues would go to the original, okay, but still include the data points that actually show the outcomes of student behavior and the choices that they've made. With regard to premier workforce, when we talk about FCPS will recruit, hire, and retain a premier workforce, when I was reading that, I don't necessarily mean that it's the same person we hired when they were 22 and they stayed with us until 65. That's great. But I see the interpretation that we will continue to maintain a premier workforce. And I know in Education Ease, when we talk about retain, part of the national data is always the turnover. There will always be a certain amount of turnover. But we want to be able to create an environment where we hire good people in the first place. And we will be continually hiring every year. We just are. So it is maintaining a premier high-quality workforce. So again, I don't know what you want to do in a
recruit, hire, and maintain. So again, is your recommendation that would say FCPS will recruit, hire, and maintain a premier
Could
workforce?
be. That's another, because that is the consistency of a high-quality workforce. Because I really think that is in reality of what we are after. because we are a large school system, there's a certain amount of turnover, even though in the educational parlance, everybody is worried about the turnover rate. And then I think the only other piece that I would agree is, again, as part of a short-term goal, we need to talk about the efficient use of our tax dollars. So other than that, I think we're making progress. Thank you.
Okay. Responses? Okay. Next we have Tammy.
Thank you. I agree with all of the language, and I think you'll be surprised at this question. It's really on page 12. And
Is that slide 12?
Slide 12. And I do appreciate where we want to go, and I had a hard time following because I missed, I think, some portion of the explanation. This is our desired outcome, so this is the blue sky where we want to be. But, and Scott, it's like who owns what? We start with all pre-K through 12 students will continuously progress. I see that as an aspirational goal, but the county is still largely responsible for pre-K. And I just was curious as to why we chose to add that to this particular one, because we have very little control over that.
Let me take a first crack, and then Sloan, you want to do the pre-K, but let me just say the one thing. One of the things that appealed to me is moving from saying we have the curriculum, we've got the stuff, to saying our kids are actually going to show progress on these attributes of a portrait of a graduate versus we offer a curriculum for it and
No,
kids.
Mine was strictly on the
just
pre-K.
on the pre-K piece.
Yep.
Okay, let me see if Sloan had a piece on that.
Yeah, again, this is one that we're definitely open to any kind of revisions. We could say all FCPS students if we wanted to do that. The reason we had originally written it this way, though, is because we are introducing Portrait of a Graduate as early as our pre-K programs. We start with executive functioning skills. So, we do have a focus there. But to your point, not all of our students attend preschool with us.
Right.
Some attend here, some attend in the county, some don't attend at all. So, we're happy to entertain any edits on that.
I'm not sure I want to edit. I just wanted to hear the thinking. So let me think on that some more because, as a strong advocate that I've been from the moment I've got on this board, of making certain that, as many of our students who need pre-K and cannot afford to do it on their own are given the opportunities. We're still struggling as a state because of the way the funding is, the braided funding that's left on the table, and the cost for us and the space for us. So I just I don't know. I just have to think on it. But I appreciate the thought, and we want that to happen. I just don't want us to be set up for a situation that we can't manage. And so I think the rest of the language is fine. And I do want to chime in on the health one. I've read that several times, and I'm agreeing with Janie, who said I think it's the desired outcome, and I don't think it needs the earlier verbiage.
Okay, I'm going to start with an easier one first and then have a question about stewardship, resource stewardship on slide number 19. So I'll go to slide number 16, when health choices. I will support what when Mrs. Strauss was advocating for the new language versus old language. New language sounds stronger because that's what we are looking for. It's not just encouraging and supporting, but ultimate outcome is the students need to make healthy choices. And that encouraging and supporting could be some of our actions that we do in FCPS, but ultimately students gotta make those healthy choices. That's what we are looking for. Just like student achievement gaps. Achievement gaps need to be eliminated. That's the outcome we are seeking. We're not just providing programs, but it has to go. So that I prefer the stronger languages. Stewardship, I must have missed this part of the discussion because Or because I wasn't part of LT doing this discussion, you came up with this language. Tell me about the rationale, how FCPS went to the school board and division superintendent. That change, somebody explain to me.
So part of that change was to provide some specificity as around who those individuals are in the system who are advocating. We've had questions at our principal rank level and teacher level in terms of who should be advocating and how those individuals advocate. And so we wanted to be very clear that with regard to those resources, that it is our superintendent and our school board who are our primary advocates for additional resources from the state, federal, and from the county. So that was the thinking behind that.
I'm just thinking about what the potential actions that would be required of school board and division superintendent, other than what he are routinely doing, might be. I mean, we make a presentation to the County Board of Supervisors. We meet with members and General Assembly, and we do, talk with our congressman. So how are we going to be able to measure this? That is, I'm stuck at, because now we're going to have, we have 12 board members for the school board. For the school board, let's say that we have 12 board members. Now we're going to require each board member to spend 5 hours a week and sending letters to 100 delegates and 40 state senators and 11 congressmen, 2 U.S. senators, and president and vice president, and 2,000 constituents. So I'm just trying to see what, under this language, that I as one board member should be doing, or school board as a collective body would be doing. Since you came up with this language, I'm putting the burden on you.
So I think that we wanted to align any refined language to what was already existing. And so the existing language stated that FCPS will regularly and systematically advocate. And again, that refinement was really more focused on those actions of the school board and the superintendent. If the board wants to take this opportunity to change that overall desired outcome, then we could certainly do that.
If I need to pick one short-term desired outcome for resource stewardship, I would prefer effective, efficient use of our resources rather than advocacy. That's why I raised the hand earlier, unless there is a strong desire to keep this one as well. But if I need to pick one, I'll go with the other one.
I certainly can't speak for the board, but in terms of staff and what we're hearing, we could certainly just take that off and focus on overarching strategy 10 and provide some language around that.
In that case, I'm not going to quibble with this new language
Very
anymore.
good. I don't want you quibbling, Mr. Moon.
Is my senior fellow?
The senior is done with.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Yes, thank you. So I appreciate, I think pretty much all of the new language is much more clear and based on outcomes, which is what we need, and the actions will come next. So that goes with the healthy life choices. I agree with the language. I think it's important because it could be things we cut, things we implement, regulations. So it's a whole variety of or a whole approach to, see what is working, what still needs to be done, from having additional support for our students. I've heard it quite a bit at the high school level. Students who say elementary, middle school, they get that warm and fuzzy support, and then our counselors are overwhelmed at the high school level. So I think I agree with the language. My question, and I don't know if Ms. McLaughlin brought this up, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. I don't have the pages, but the short term and the midterm, when we're talking about the early pre-K, I can't remember what page that was. 12. No, well, on the main, I guess I'm looking at the main one. And I know we're not looking at targets.
Slide 14.
Sure, yes. And on the page 15, I believe, on the In the document.
In the document.
No. Not page 15. Or where we say about expanding pre-K. 15, okay. So I know for some of them, where things that are, it's listed in the short term, and I know we haven't updated the actions, but it's a little, oh, thank you. It's a little bit confusing to me how we expect.
Page 21.
21. How we expect to get there in the short term. I love that it's in the short term, but looking at the dots, I'm not sure how we get there in the short term. They look pretty far from short term. So it looks like everything is in the red and the orange.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly correct, right? I mean, over the last several years, we've made a little bit of progress in reducing the number of students that qualify that could be served, but I mean, certainly the gap is really big. And when we did estimated costs on essentially what would it take to ensure that we had programming for all qualifying students, we're at about $50 million to do that. So I think the question is this a short-term priority that we want to identify to the community and that we want to continue to really work towards, even understanding that it is going to be a long-term process to be able to get there. So we certainly could move it to a midterm or a longer-term priority, but the idea by keeping it as a short-term priority is this is something that we would really continue to push on and push towards.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I would love it to be in the short term. I also want us to be realistic of what it takes to get there. And are we creating a plan with the county to get there? Or is this a wish list short term? I mean, I guess that's something we need to discuss. So I will hold off on that, and maybe my colleagues have thoughts on that. But that concerns me. That we don't really have a plan for that, even though I know we all agree that should be a priority. So perhaps it does have to be midterm and something more achievable, attainable beyond the short term, a smarter goal per se than that. So that's just a thought. On the midterm, and then on the flip side, things that are, sorry.
I probably shouldn't do this, but just kind of going back and thinking about the comment that you made, are these things that are definitively going to be achieved in this 2-year period of time? Or are these things that we're really signaling as a priority where we need to divert our resources and our attention and align our resources, right, and really focus? Because we're probably not going to close all of our achievement gaps in a 2-year period of time, and that's also listed as a short-term priority. So that was the thinking, definitely as a leadership team when we were going through this and doing the voting. I think that was probably pretty similar to the thinking to the board when you were going through and doing the voting and the prioritization. And then this is really the synthesis of that work where there was synthesis and agreement on both parts of the organization in terms of thinking about what the priorities are. But we certainly can adjust any of them. There's no question about that.
No, right. It's okay. And maybe what it means is for the next step when we look at the actions is thinking about what are some attainable short-term actions, right? So is it targeted expansion as we have the map showing where we have the greatest need? Do we start to look at actions that are achievable
And we can
in the
certainly
short
look
term?
at that with the actions. I'll take a note right now about that.
Thank you, because that is an area I know we have several areas with high need, and perhaps we can start. I know I was at a budget meeting last night, and the county said they're adding 36 slots, and that
I was at that budget meeting too.
Yes, you were. You did an excellent job, Mr. Smith, and that brought a bit of shock from the audience that was all that was being added on the county side. So I appreciate that. And then I guess on the flip side, just a question, if we have things that are listed as midterm, but they look like they're being achieved in the short term, and I think should be short term, the welcome and supporting environment for our students and staff. So can we raise those if we feel like
we'll get to that. We're going to focus on the desired outcomes first. We still are. It's getting later in the evening, so I want to focus on the desired outcomes, and then we'll have a chance to look at the rankings and the prioritizations.
Okay, next we have Tamster.
Thank you.
I don't know who that is, but I'll answer. I was just Dal, you made me think, and then I was thinking about what I had said earlier. I do think we have to talk about having access to high quality early education. While I am grateful that SCIP exists, and it was the hope when Pat Hines and I went to Sharon Boulevard to say this is something that we really need. We need to address this, and the SCIP committee was created out of that conversation and several others that many other people have had. But SCIP has grown tentacles, and I think it has many. It is doing good things, but the original goal was to do this. And I think if we don't put this as our short-term goal, if we don't put this as a priority, even though it's a short-term desired outcome.
It is currently a short-term desired outcome.
Yes,
it's there.
I know that, but I was, Dahlia was kind of thinking and talking out loud, so I wanted to comment on that conversation. And I do think, even though this is very aspirational, I may feel more comfortable, and I guess, we can discuss however we're going to vote on these things. I would say all FCPS pre-K-12 students will continually progress, because I don't know how else we can address that child that doesn't have anything. So I appreciate the desire there, but I think we should, target that to where we are. And then, because the county has its own objective, and like she said, it's slowly every year adding these slots. But when you talk about who owns what, we need to own what we want to do. And if we have these kids under our guidance, then I really support that goal wholeheartedly. But I think we need to identify them that way.
Could I have a quick, go back, that you reminded me of this language? I do believe, so my understanding is this is all pre-K to 12 FCPS students, right? We're not talking about private school students or students not, right? So I do think I would support the pre-K to 12 because it's our students. We should be
all FCPS pre-K to 12 students.
Right, because we're also not talking about adult students doing Portrait of a Graduate, right? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, I think that was all of our go-backs. I'm largely in agreement with some of the changes that have been suggested with respect to making stewardship, moving that up to a priority. I did want to keep the pre-K language because I think it's a part of One Fairfax, and I think we need to have that as one of our goals. So I think many of my colleagues have spoken to my concerns. I don't think Ryan had any.
Can you just take a pulse, because there was a little bit of a
pulse about what?
I would actually like to go through and take a pulse of each one before we're done.
Let Marty do his thing.
I would like to take a pulse of each one before we're done, so that we have the final language before we move on to the next piece of the process. So I don't want to cut you off, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Okay. So we're going to actually take that pulse now, much like you did when we moved the desired outcome up for overarching strategy 10. So I'll take your left hand, Mr. Moon. Let's go to slide 12. So our current desired outcome, we have that language there, but we have lots of feedback on our refined desired outcome. And I will read some language to you that all FCPS pre-K to 12 students will continuously progress in their development of Portrait of a Graduate attributes.
I just have one question about that. Do we use that phrase attributes to describe that in the actual document?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. So to take a pulse. Done. Thank you very much. Slide 13. We have that FCPS will eliminate gaps in student opportunity, access, and achievement gaps. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. Let's see. FCPS will eliminate gaps in student opportunity, access, and achievement.
I prefer, could you consider putting students at the end? Eliminate gaps in opportunity, access, and achievement for students.
FCPS will eliminate gaps in opportunity, access, and achievement for students. Very good. The next refined on slide 14, all future FCPS students will have access to high-quality early education programs. The black is the original, so we're going with the red text here. We're
But
good.
Marty, there's no change to the red. You're just going back over to
Yes,
triple check. Okay,
we're just
got it.
triple checking. All right, we're good. Slide 15. There really wasn't much discussion on slide 15 that FCPS employees will demonstrate cultural responsiveness when supporting families, students, and other staff. Okay, we're good. All right, here's the controversial slide.
Shouldn't set it up like that.
I'm sorry.
It is 10 till 9.
Here's the one we've all been waiting for.
No problems here.
Yes. I'm only keeping track here. Yes, I was doing so well too. So as we look at the language here, FCPS students will make healthy life choices. That's the refined language. We have those who want to keep the original language. We have those who want to keep the refined language, and then there are strong points on both sides. That's up to you. Okay, we have our Ms. Keys-Gamarra is running the meeting.
You all hang on your own guitar.
And then we've actually had very good conversations with Ms. Evans. And she was going to listen to the conversation tonight and also take what the board said. So, no, we did not. I felt like she was here tonight. Slide 17. FCPS will offer market competitive compensation packages. Very good. Slide 18, we have FCPS will recruit, hire. We had retain a premier workforce, and we had a recommendation to say maintain a premier workforce. So we have FCPS will recruit, hire, and retain a premier workforce.
That's the language as it's currently written.
That's the new language as it's currently written. Yes.
Chase, if you got something to say, they're about to vote, so feel like you can speak up. That this board wants to hear from staff when
But
there's
not
an
on this
issue.
piece. I was waiting until they go to the retain versus maintain. Then I have something.
So what's it?
What the choices will be.
I don't know if we're able to type on this document. I can tell you. So FCPS will recruit, hire, and retain a premier workforce. FCPS will recruit, hire, and maintain a premier workforce. And FCPS will work to recruit, hire, and retain a premier workforce.
So my only feedback is if we're going to change the language from retain to maintain, I know it's small, but I'd like to do a little research because retain and retention are the words normally used inside human resources circles as well inside what we're used to in the school vernacular. And so that would be my only feedback is that's the common term that's used.
Do you have a
retain.
suggestion on how we handle this question?
I do.
Yes.
The third one, Marty, was work to recruit, hire, and retain, was it not? The third one?
That was the third one.
Do the third one first and see if the board...
So FCPS will work to recruit, hire, and retain a premier workforce. We have two.
So the alternative, I guess, would be to allow you to do your research somehow and then get, is
We'll
that
go
a?
back to first.
I thought okay.
We can go back to, so here's the vote on FCPS will recruit, hire, and retain a premier workforce.
Okay with that.
That's what's on the
on the
board.
board. I thought we already voted on that.
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
This is the red on the board. Oh, and I see.
That's fine. I'll go with, if this is where people want to go.
Okay, so we're good.
Okay, we're good with that, and we are.
Dr. Ramey, do you feel comfortable that we can say that we will retain?
Yes, that's what he wants.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean,
Yes.
No, I mean, as opposed to work two.
I am fine with
Okay.
either
Language
this
that came
or
up with,
work
so
two.
there's no-
We have
can-
now moved on
Yes,
from this.
we're on the next one.
Thank you.
Yes, we're on the next one.
So this actually will need to get some consensus as to whether or not we keep this or we remove it. So what.
Can we vote? Can we vote? No.
For this one, we had some input from the board that perhaps we would not want to go with this because there were other desired outcomes that you would like to move up in priority as short term and not have this be a short term desired outcome for resource stewardship.
I personally am comfortable with it.
Oh.
So here's what we'll do. We'll vote and then we will prioritize. So with the vote, we have the current language is to FCPS regularly and systematically advocate for fiscal resources at the county, state, and federal levels. How many of you would like to keep that language? Okay. So you're keeping that language, but you're not necessarily keeping that desired outcome because next we're going to look at the prioritization piece.
We still need to go to the one that we were going to add.
The desired outcome.
That's
short term.
that's where we're going next. So we haven't decided whether this is short term or midterm. So I'm sorry. We have a sidebar going on here. So this is the language that we've decided to keep for the desired outcomes that we've discussed. We're now going to prioritize, and we'll actually start with resource stewardship so we can decide whether or not we want to move any of the other midterm or long-term up to short-term, and whether or not you want to move this short-term down to midterm or long-term. Yes.
So on what they just voted on, because I didn't raise my hand, who is accountable? Like if that's the outcome, who's accountable based on all the conversations you guys have had to date in bringing this to us? Who's accountable for the FCPS will? Because that's what I heard you saying, that the back conversation was, Dr. Braybrand, is who's the will? Who will? So I don't understand the correlation between what you guys just voted on and right, but what the staff did leading up to now was saying if you want the metrics to be measurable, somebody has to be held accountable in the outcome. Who's doing it? Who's doing the work now? I'm just
I think that changed from the
oh.
well, and you guys. I really would like to move to that part.
I was not part of when this outcome was initially put up. It was part of the original strategic plan. My concern with this is an activity. We will systematically advocate. It doesn't have as the outcome we will actually receive adequate funding from the county, state, and federal levels. This is an action. It's not an outcome. And so that's my concern about this as being a outcome. It's why I suggested we should look at our own fiscal management, and maybe if what the issue is we will develop budgets. Our outcome will be our budgets will reflect the adequate funding by the federal, state, and local governments. But this is not an outcome.
Are you motioning that this should not be an outcome then?
You know what? I'm having a little problem with this whole discussion because we just voted on that language and 7 people said that language was okay. We were about to move on as to where exactly it should fit, and now we're going back a step to reevaluate. I'm not sure
I
that
think
that's
we
the-
were pushing through because we thought that
I wasn't pushing through.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is, I don't think it was clear that what we were doing is doing this and not talking about actual resource stewardship. And so that's my concern, is the actual outcome of resource stewardship are outcomes such as that we can talk about. But this is just, I don't think.
Okay. I think that Marty had a suggestion as to how we handle that. Maybe we can hear from him as to how we go forward, because I personally, unless somebody's saying they didn't understand besides Karen, because I don't think, okay, right, I don't think you voted for it. So if we could just hear from staff as to how we can go forward, I think that's probably the best approach.
So we voted on the language so that we could move to the next step. We could possibly then, you as a board, could vote to amend the language because we were just moving to the next step. We also know that board members felt that there were other more pressing desired outcomes that they would like to see moved to the short term, and perhaps this would be moved to a midterm or a longer term. In that same vein, you could consider changing the language. I know that there were desired outcomes that we felt that we would want to refine more, but we wanted to stay in the spirit of the original desired outcome. But Ms. Corbett-Sanders, I understand what you're saying because it reads like an action. It's not where we want to be at the end of a particular time frame. So I agree with that.
So I'll just give my comment, and then we can take 3 minutes to figure out what the next step is. But I personally see resource stewardship as having two parts. This is one part of it. The other part would be our duty with respect to being good stewards over our resources. That's kind of how my mind was seeing that. But I'm certainly open to hear what other people have to say. Tammy?
If I can agree with both of you, I will. I know that seems odd. But I think, Karen, you are correct in what you're saying. It is an activity, not an outcome. I get that. But I am going to be a little bit of a historian because I remember talking about this because I was in the same position that I have now, the federal legislative liaison, when we were working on this. And if we don't have this as part of our advocacy, we will never get to that point where when we talked about how are we going to get that 40%? How are we going to get that impact aid? And so that's why I think Karen said it well. You have to continue to have this advocacy, even though, yes, you have to be the fiscal stewards of the budget. But if you don't have this advocacy, because we have no money. We have no money. We can't have our own money, so we have to advocate. So how can you not have this as part of research stewardship? Because we are not a body that can generate funds for ourselves.
And Claire, so you're saying yes to that there's the two parts remaining at this level as an outcome?
Yes.
Okay.
If Karen, one thing we might be able to do, I think you want to take one of the items that was in mid or long term around benchmarking or the budget decision framework, put it short term, and maybe embed this as one of the actions as part of the outcome. So we could, as staff, when we come back, we're coming back to you anyway with the actions. We can take what we've heard today, and if you want to vote, you can vote. But we'll pull up one of these outcomes into short term and put this in as one of the strategies under that short term action.
Janie wanted to add to the conversation.
From listening to what everybody else is advocating for, I think it is our responsibility to maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of our resources. I don't see the exact language in any of the overarching strategies, but I think that's what everybody's talking about. It's effective and efficient use of resources available.
And as I look at the actions and the desired outcomes, I think of actions as if we do this, that's the action, this will happen. That's the desired outcome. So if we use that as an action, if we regularly and systematically advocate for those resources, what is the outcome? What will happen? So I think that we can incorporate that as an action as part of a desired outcome that's focused more on that outcome of being good stewards. So with that, if that's the case, let's look at the prioritization of, if you turn to page 44 in your document.
What's he doing now?
We now know that we have some input on whether or not we want to keep this particular, oh, I'm sorry, we're on the document, but whether or not we want to keep the desired outcome around advocating. We know that we haven't voted on whether or not we want to do that. We know that we have input. I don't know if we did, so I wouldn't want to assume that.
So it was interesting. You started to go there, and that's what I was going to say as a suggestion. What we have as listed as the short-term outcome, that actually is an action that if we do it, supports what we're trying to get to, which is the outcome really should be the resource stewardship language. And so this needs to, that exact thing, whether you want it to be, and every 7 people voted for FCPS. Okay, then move the FCPS will regularly and systematically advocate for fiscal resources, county, state. Move that over to the second column as an action, because if we do that, we're supporting the notion of the resource stewardship language. And then down below in that second section of the table at the bottom, and you may have to work with it a little bit, but the language is going to come there, which is we're, working on attributing, stewardship with our resources and allocation to the strategic plan. So that's what has to come back out.
Mine is, and I'm just doing as superintendent of, and I know I'm not in charge of the meeting. It is a little after 9, and I know, there's as a economy major, there's the marginal return, marginal cost. Give us a chance to go back on this one instead of having you grind on this for a lot more time, and let us get. And then and good. We'll get that. We'll get the outcome and action matched up right.
Okay, then let's turn.
Since I was the one who. I had my hand up but didn't get called back. This was the one that I brought up on the page 44. Page 44, where we were, it was up, and everybody's like, go ahead, let staff work on it, but I'm not hearing, what I remember you were supportive of and others were saying, which is under desired outcome, where it's not just whether we were debating the prior language on advocacy. It is in these next 3 years as a short-term priority, what are we doing about our fiscal stewardship? In the way that we develop the budget, what we're doing to maximize what resources we've got versus trying to just get more money being brought our way. And so I just want to make sure that's the kind of language we're talking about, because I wasn't what I heard.
That's what we're talking about.
Staff to create.
Okay, so let's turn to page 40. We're now prioritizing those mid and long-term desired outcomes for Premier Workforce. You'll note that on page 40, you can see that these are our midterm priority outcomes. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No. To continue?
We got through short term, Marty. That's pretty good.
I feel like being able to get through the short term, this is really what we wanted to get through on Monday when we were going to amend the schedule. So getting this far is really a very big win for us. So we appreciate the time. We appreciate the input. I appreciate my colleagues sitting here. We were going.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I checked out for a minute.
So
I'm back. Okay. So
And we also have some feedback because some board members earlier gave us feedback on prioritization of some of the desired outcomes. So we can include that in our next, but we know moving forward that this is the desired outcome language that we're going to build upon. Yep. We will bring you some refined language around actions, around specific actions, and we'll then also provide you an opportunity to take a second look at the prioritization.
So, okay, so you're able to cut here. Is that what you're saying?
We're
okay.
able to cut here.
Megan wanted to make a comment, I think.
Yeah, and I think Tammy, weren't you wanting to comment too? So I'll go first.
I just
she called on me, Tammy. She called on me. I'm just letting you know you can speak next if you like.
But it's my turn. It's my turn.
It's my turn.
Oh my goodness.
She called on me. Middle child. I'm claiming middle child. No, I know that we're not going to go into actions, but since staff's still working on it at a very high level, Dr. Brabrand, I wanted you to know, some of us have been saying this for 6 years on metrics and action. If we set a low bar, that's all we end up doing. So I noticed under a lot of the action, under student achievement, it kept saying pass rate, pass rate, pass rate. We are not a pass rate school system. We are a pass advanced school system. So what I would hope to see in this next iteration is there needs to be some metrics about what are our pass rates looking like. Because if we're really about, academic opportunities and closing, real gaps, it's not just pass rates. So that was the big piece for me. And I also want to see if we're about grading integrity, AP, IB test scores in comparison to how they correlate with the final year-end grade. That's a metric I don't see, but it's one we've been asking for years.
Mine, Mr. Smith, was just, can you please give us our homework for the next session? So what you want us to do. I need to be very clear since I am, as Ms. Schultz says, I am at a place where my capabilities are diminishing.
For the next session, we will bring you some refined language on the actions.
Okay.
We'll also want you to take a look at the prioritization of the current desired outcomes, those midterm, short-term, long-term. Do you want anything moved up or down?
All right.
And then last piece of homework is to do what Ms. McLaughlin has done and look at some of our performance targets and metrics and weigh in on that. I haven't gotten anything back, and so I'm feeling that we're good there in some areas. Oh, no, I got a lot back from Ms. Karen Corbett-Sanders, but we're going to add that in the next session. So I did get back. But I haven't gotten anything around the performance targets and the metrics, so we're feeling good about that.
And Mr. Smith, we've had a request if you will email us our homework.
Yes,
we will.
I was about to say
we will
that.
email you your homework.
Short memory.
That's right.
Thank you.
Do not assume we heard you.
And as we close, I do just want to take a moment to publicly. I do have to publicly acknowledge. Miss Lida Haruda and Julie Fowler, who are here. They've stayed this entire time.
Yay!
And the entire Orsi staff for the work that they've done to get us to this point.
Yep.
It's been like moving a boulder up a hill. And every time they bring something and I say, no, this isn't right, can we do this? They take that boulder and break it down into much smaller pieces.
I'd like to end on just saying this. We heard you last time. Marty went back, led the leadership team, led Orsi through taking this plan, and we think we've brought you a better plan than what we had before that's really going to help actually improve the board's ability to discuss budget, to discuss strategy, to measure outcomes. The actions part is still the last piece here, and we'll be bringing that back, but we appreciate it. And Marty, thank you for doing the work with all these folks I thought we had for me as superintendent, it was a long day. We've had a long week. This was a very productive meeting for our staff, and I want you to know that as feedback, and I appreciate the board's information. Some of it mirrored what we did, which was kind of exciting, some of even the debate, and some of it really helped us move up some priorities after hearing what you had to say. So thank you very much.
And none of it controversial. And I would like to thank Chantal Follett, who is here as well. I didn't see her behind Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Good night, everybody.
Take home cupcake. Take home a homemade cupcake. Made the cupcakes.